Welcome to the In Early podcast, where I speak to those at the forefront of the digital assets and technology sectors, telling real-life stories, considering the growth and growing pains of the industry, and exploring how blockchain and other technology has made an impact on people's lives. My name is Matt Green, and I head up blockchain, digital assets, and technology disputes at law firm Lawrence Stevens. This week I speak to Scott Pounder, formerly of the Met Police, Crystal Blockchain, and now founder of Prometheus Insights. We talk about his journey, his perspectives from law enforcement to private enterprise, as well as some success stories in preventing financial crime. I hope you enjoy. Scott, welcome.
Hello.
Should we just get straight into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So my understanding is that your career, certainly involving blockchain digital assets, can be broken down into three main phases, right? You've got your time in the Metropolitan Police, you were with the Central Specialist Crime Command, focusing on complex crime investigations and money laundering. 2, as head of investigations at Crystal Blockchain. And then 3, joining the corporate world, where you were at FTI Consulting. And then you've started now your own practice as the founder and CEO of Prometheus Insights. With all of these things, let's start at the top. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did at the Met Police?
Yeah, so with the Met Police, and there was a small tenure at City of London Police as well. I started 16 years in the Met Police, mostly dealing with complex fraud, cybercrime, and then a tiny bit of crypto, and that started coming in, but it was still early days back then, so it wasn't really that much crypto. And then for one point, I think it was about a year and a half, nearly, maybe 2 years, I was leading all the strategic decision-making for all the volume frauds, complex fraud and cyber that was coming in from actual fraud. And the role was to basically review, see if anything is it a goer? Can we do anything with it? And then allocate to the correct teams to deal. I went to City of London Police for 11 months, and their financial investigation unit, so asset recovery and money laundering, and kind of thing, and went back to the Met again.
What made you go back? What was the difference?
If just my own personal opinion, I'm sure people have got different opinions on it, but I didn't even have one job the entire time I was there. It wasn't my own case; it was someone else's case, and I was just assisting on it.
Right.
And just going through thousands of pages of documents, just checking for stuff. So not necessarily keeping me in fraud, as it were. Whereas when I was at the Met, you could have anything up to 30 plus cases that you're dealing with, much more interesting, keeps you busy, make sure they go in.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're engaged in the process and you're taking ownership of it, then you have more skin in the game and you want to find a really good result.
Yeah, just felt there was a few more resources available as well, even though still very slim, but felt I could do a bit more there than I could at the other place.
And before we talk about some of the crypto things that you were doing, what was sort of bread and butter for you before the world of blockchain came into your life?
So it would have been complex fraud would have been the most part of it, or just any fraud in general. Money laundering, that was the bread and butter of the Central Specialist Crime, Economic Crime Command. They keep changing names every year.
What does that look like? Because you don't sort of like catch one red-handed money laundering, do you? It's like document heavy.
Yeah, so a lot of it was reactive. So someone would make a report to action fraud, for example, that would then at some point get disseminated to the teams. I would get disseminated one, and then I would look at it and then go from there, see what it is, what I can do, and then crack on.
And it's paper heavy in that respect. So you're not sort of walking the beat, or as I say, there's not like you stumble upon a big swathe of drugs or guns or anything like that.
Yeah, not since 2005.
Okay.
Last time I had uniform on.
Okay, right. And do you have any success stories whilst at the Met, whether it relates to crypto or not, that you can talk about?
Yeah, so one of the last ones I dealt with before I left for the private sector, best thing I ever did. It was a case of, it was just a simple stop of someone in a suspicious vehicle, and then just basically, I'll keep it short. We then went to his address, and then when we've got into the address, they are stacks of credit cards, correspondence, There's iPads everywhere, computers.
Just a tech enthusiast.
Yeah, exactly. Tech guy, yeah. And a really good printer in the corner. And then there was a couple of sacks of cannabis on the side and piles of cash. And it's like, so I started looking through, and it's like loads of different names or lots of the same name. And then again, there was loads of ID cards as well for Lithuania, Romania, all the Eastern European countries, and it would have like the same photo on,
right?
Different names, and there'd be like 10 of each sort of thing. And then we went into the other room, see the computer was open and unlocked, and there was an email from. It was one of the banks. I think it might have been Starling Bank. I'm not sure. But it was about a bounce back loan. So, during COVID, people were making applications to get 50,000 or up to 50,000 for each company. So we see that, started diving. So obviously seized everything, all the devices, took those back, downloaded everything. And then and then on the computer, there was like loads of signatures, all those photos, the ID cards. And then obviously there then started being loads of emails from different banks and companies doing these bounce back loans. So what he was doing was it opened up loads of different companies and it just applied for all these loans.
So it was a COVID fraud. It was one of those things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and it was over 200,000 just to start with for that side.
Yeah. Was it one individual or was it part of an organised criminal gang?
It was definitely organised crime. But how it works is he just went no comment in interview, which is pretty common for me or for most officers.
I've watched 24 Hours in Police Custody. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not like on TV dramas, which I refuse to watch.
Yeah, it's like Suits with us.
Yeah, they're like grabbing them across the table and stuff and throwing chairs. The chairs are screwed into the floor,
probably for good reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they can't hit the face. It's like that, and then. Obviously sent all the documents off as well.
Yeah.
All dodgy apart from, I think one of them, they said they couldn't say it was that good. And then like the printer was obviously where he was doing it all from.
Yeah.
Didn't really know how far advanced they'd got now with these printers. But even when we was there, you like outside there was like a cafe and there was a few guys sitting there and you sort of get the feeling that they were just watching because they knew we was going back and forth in the premises. But yeah, so like, he goes no comment and then pleads guilty at court because he's obviously more scared of them than he was of the police. So yeah, he's inside. So,
and you're sort of relatively. My sense of things is when I asked that question, you said it was the best thing you ever did moving out of the Met into private practice. Why?
Oh, how long have we got?
A summary.
Yeah, I'll keen to hear it. Yeah. I mean, I'll keep it short and non-offensive if I can. It's just the guys on the ground, great. Got a lot of respect for those guys, and I'm still in regular contact with a lot of them. And that's what I miss. The banter and stuff like that. And our people work together to get stuff done. But I feel with various governments and leadership changes. It just got worse and worse, and it was, less and less resources. They want more and more. I was seeing friends go off on stress that I never thought would. It's just stuff like that. And they're just like, you just, instead of like, so you do a good job, and instead of, getting any praise or anything like that. I mean, yeah, sure, that's my job. But it was just
basic carrot that people need.
Yeah, it'll just be like, they'll be picking like what was wrong about it, So you just get nothing but negativity.
Poor culture and lack of resources, maybe.
Yeah, and just sort of bit of that, like sort of the attitude from sort of up above, and it's not all of them as always, but it's generally their view is if you don't like it, there's the door, and they think that there's a queue of people at Hendon waiting to become police officers, and there just isn't. It's not really an attractive job anymore.
So how did you then move to Crystal? Because it seems like towards the end of your tenure as a police officer, there was a little bit of work relating to crypto, but maybe not much. I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, so stuff started to sort of rear its head, but nobody, I think Action Fraud is probably writing off most of it anyway. But we can go into that in a bit.
Well, let's actually come to that now, because I'd sort of skipped ahead of the question. What can be quite unclear to people, and was unclear to me when I was, before I sort of started doing all this, is who does what and why. So, for example, the Serious Fraud Office says quoting from his website, "It fights complex financial crime, delivers justice for victims, and protects the UK's reputation as a safe place to do business," end quote. The National Crime Agency's mission is to quote, "protect the public from serious and organised crime," end quote. And then you have Action Fraud, which you've referred to a few times, which says it's the, quote, "UK's National Reporting Centre for Fraud and Cybercrime, where you can report fraud if you have been scammed, defrauded, or experienced cybercrime," end quote. Can you explain what these entities do and how they fit into policing, preventing crime, and specifically financial crime?
Yeah, so I'll start with Action Fraud, as that's where we was.
Yeah.
So they're like a customer service feedback center, really. You just report any fraud or cyber, as they say on their website. Just report it to them. They don't investigate anything. They just review them and they send them out to that whatever false area, according to their Home Office county rules, that crime took place, or where the business was, where the suspect was, where the victim was.
So it's the most basic bit of data. Then capture that and put it on a big database.
Yeah. So they just then send it to each. So they'll send to the Metropolitan Police, Greater Manchester Police, and then like I did. So they'll have a unit within that'll then review everything that's come from Action Fraud, and then they'll send it out to their various teams. The National Crime Agency, that's more like going after all the organised crime groups, disrupting and tackling things like that, human trafficking and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, crypto's starting to be a part of everything, even your basic drug dealer on the street that, you look on they'll get stop and search, check their phones. They'll probably likely have some kind of crypto app on there to receive or give money, And then you have the Serious Fraud Office, which deals with the sort of larger, complex frauds that could affect business, or where you might have, 1,000 victims, say. Something like that that's probably maybe a bit too large for some of the other agencies. But in fairness, when I was at the Met, I can remember frauds that dealt with just as many, dealing with a lot less resources as well.
So what's the advice? Is it to ever go to these agencies, or is it just go through local police, or what?
Yeah, so I'd say for the general member of public, Action Fraud's your first point of call for reporting. The other two are more for larger scale jobs. And even if you do report to Action Fraud and it is part of a larger scale, you'd hope that would then get flagged and sent that way. Part
of the frustration that I have with clients is they report it to Action Fraud and then they go, well, nothing's happened. No one's investigating it. So a big fraud has to pick up a case from Action Fraud.
Yeah.
But victims feel like they've reported it to Action Fraud and then someone's going to pick up the baton and run with it. And a lot of the time that doesn't happen.
No, the role is just to literally review it and forward it on to other forces.
And would there be instances where it doesn't get forwarded or just sits there?
Yeah, quite a lot. When I was at Crystal, for example, I reported several cases of crypto fraud or other items around crypto and how it could potentially damage other businesses and things like that. And every single one of them received an email back saying no further action.
Why do they do that? Why can't? I mean, what's the reasoning? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't think they have targets and things like that saying you've got to get rid of 90%. Although I'd say they probably are writing off 90%.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any standard operating procedure where they say. I mean, sure, they'll probably have things like, if it's under this amount, they might do that. Don't know if they'd ever admit to that, but.
It's almost like that thing when people go to interviews and that's a sort of story in the corporate world where you put a CV in and you see, one of the higher ups bin, take half of them and bin them. And someone goes, why are you binning them? He goes, well, I don't want to hire anyone unlucky. It's a little bit like that where you just need to get rid of some of the numbers on whatever basis you can.
Yeah. I think it's probably down to resources as well. Forces can't necessarily cope with maybe looking at 100% of reports to Action Fraud. I mean, within that, there is going to be a lot of things that you can't do anything with. Someone might have lost, £100 on a crypto scam investment, which they got messaged on, Instagram or something. But they'll be the ones that complain as well.
Well, then you moved on to Crystal Blockchain, which is a blockchain and I believe open source intelligence software provider. Its website says that it monitors crypto transactions and suspicious activity. And to quote from his website, to track and trace transactions globally to uncover fraud and illicit activity, and activity monitor financial crime risk, set comprehensive alert systems, and manage your firm's exposure to sanctioned businesses and entities. What did you do there? And can you give any specific examples of some of the things you worked on? Because I know you enjoyed that job.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And it was hard to leave as well. I only sort of wish I hadn't. But yeah. So I was the head of investigations there. Had a team of analysts, and obviously Crystal as itself is a blockchain analytics provider, and that just helps people with, compliance investigations, but yeah, generally we were just doing like tons of reports and investigations into anything and everything you can think of to do with crypto, exchange hacks, private individuals, high net worth individuals, all sorts of stuff going on, hacking, organized crime disruption, was doing everything. And we was working with most agencies across the globe, had very strong presence in sort of Eastern Europe as well. A lot of good contacts that way. There was a lot of sharing. But yeah, so it's just, but then the end result would be, we'd be sharing data to disrupt organized crime groups and hacking groups as well. That's quite a big one for us. And then it was just doing either intel reports or evidential statements, which were used in court cases. So I sort of think one of the last ones I did was for an exchange hack. I mean, I won't say which one, but it was in the Royal Courts of Justice over here. Did an evidential statement for it. Another blockchain firm, did one as well because they wanted to see that it came up with the same. We found a bit more than they did.
So you were happy about that? We knew.
Yeah, definitely happy with that one. And it was all that good that they didn't even require us to give evidence. So quite nice.
So it was because Chain used to do sort of things. Chain Analysis were a big competitor. They used to, back in the day when they were much smaller, provide reports and give evidence and have experts. Then they sort of pivoted, at least to my understanding, to just provide software, and they were sort of very hands off. And they provide reports for industry, crypto crime reports they do every year, software, and they would maybe get involved with helping law enforcement. But it was frustrating because they didn't actually sort of, in the civil route where there's victims who can't use the criminal system, they use the civil system. And they weren't sort of willing to provide evidence, or at least they haven't done for a number of years. Whilst it sounds like what Crystal were doing was standing behind their evidence and saying that they're willing to go to court based upon what they found. I guess that's a key difference between maybe two of the companies.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we was always willing to do investigations, and I think that's how we first got in contact, wasn't it? Because you was struggling to find other firms that were still doing it. So yeah, we all, and they still do. They still do it. And I think they gave an expert witness testimony only a few months ago, I believe. I can't remember where it was. But so they're still doing investigations and things like that. The other thing is that, they do, like, I know what goes into their data attribution and the steps that they take to say it is what it is. Some other tools have been criticized in the past for labeling a lot of things that maybe needed a bit of work first. And then the end result is a false positive and someone's money getting frozen incorrectly. And, and I've helped a few people out with that as well. But yeah, and the other thing is, you're allowed to use their visuals in your statements and go to court, whereas quite a few of the firms just won't let you do that.
So when you say firms, you mean the competitors, the blockchain analytics firms. They won't allow you to, I've heard this before actually, they weren't allowed to provide diagrams. Because I swear again, it was one of the big, I think it was Chain, that was one of the very higher ups was essentially saying that they didn't really know how the software worked. I sort of in court, and then they said that it shouldn't be relied upon in court, which wasn't very helpful.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that a bit later, but some firms, not all firms, but some of the bigger ones won't let you use their images or the data, and and the reason being, I imagine, and just my opinion, is that if they go to court with a case and it's thrown out or proven to be incorrect or their data is unreliable, that's a big part of their business.
Bad marketing.
Yeah, it'll just be like, well, that's not reliable, and that they could potentially, it's a massive issue overnight.
I suppose it's right, because in cases, if it says, oh yeah, we had our report done by party X and the other side said we had our party Y, one's going to be right and one's going to be wrong. They could both be, I suppose they could both be right, but if anybody's wrong, that's a massive disruptor to the marketing of that of company.
Yeah.
I note, however, well, not even however, I note that Nick Smart and his team have been giving in-depth webinars on some of the most recent happenings in the space, including Garantex, following the US authority seizure of the domain, and the Bybit hack conducted by Lazarus. I joined that talk online. It was very, very good. These are especially compelling sessions, and obviously puts to light Nick and his team and what they do and how good they are. What are Crystal doing right as opposed to some of the other software providers? Because to me, that seems like an obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, having worked there and and seeing how others do stuff. I mean, some of the other competitors have great marketing, okay? And they're very quick to get stuff out when it happens. And and Crystal may have struggled with that in the past, but yeah, now their output is increased massively, and it's all quality as well. They go for stuff that is useful, that helps people. That they're not just looking to go, oh, Bybit hack. Let's do a bit on the Bybit hack, and you should show the tool tracing the Bybit hack. They'll do other stuff. They'll talk about things that others might not want to talk about as well. And I felt it was always like that when I was there. They were going after different things, a different way of looking at it rather than just
Marketing opportunity.
Yeah, and sort of like the corporate side. Oh, let's do this, but let's not say this because it's a bit risky.
How do they do their data attribution? Because, again, some of the big companies rely on open source and what people input, and that can be useful and cannot be. So data attribution is essentially where an address will be, because all addresses are pseudonymous, right? So you're not going to know who's behind it. But via data analysis and clustering, you can tell that certain organized criminal gangs use certain addresses, and that the way they interact with each other means that you can largely identify if a big exchange is behind an address or if a hacking group is behind this particular address because of the way they use it. But this, of course, always relies on data and data attribution. How did Crystal deal with data attribution? How did they gather it? And did you have any involvement in that?
Yeah, so in terms of where they get the data from, same as all the other competitors, or a lot of it. So they'll scrape the internet. They'll use open source intelligence. They will use paid for tools around intelligence. They have sharing agreements with law enforcement. There's stuff on the dark web as well. There's research going on, research teams, there's intel teams. And there's also, I believe it was a 30-step process before they would label something as it was.
It's quite rigorous, and 30 steps is quite a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot. Nick was very, very thorough, and it was, and that's why I like it. I feel like I can trust it, what they say. And they'll also tell me where the data came from if I need it. So if I'm doing an expert report for a court case, now I can say where that data's come from. I can stand there and say, it's come from this. So if there's any questions around data attribution and the reliability, I could just say, well, it came from here.
So it's not just saying Crystal says so, therefore it must be. It's Crystal says so, and that's backed by X, and this is where I'm going to show it.
Yeah, this was given to us by, say, the Met Police, Police, Cyber Division or whatever.
Do you not get into difficulty if it's dark web stuff or stuff that you may not be able, more intelligent stuff rather than...
Yeah, I think that's why the process is there, to eliminate any issues that could be around it. But yeah, so I think they obviously must, they research on them to see what addresses keep coming up. I think we've all probably had an email, a sextortion email or something like that saying, pay into this address. I share those with the guys. So there's loads of stuff you can do. I know some of the open source companies that, the paid tools, they will distribute bots across Telegram, for example, and harvest all the addresses and things like that. There's quite a lot going on. And now with AI coming through a bit better than it was, I imagine that's going to take a place as well.
So when you're using apps like Telegram, all these sort of things are happening in the background. You've got no idea. You just message him.
Yeah.
So it's good that. And then you move to FTI Consulting. you pulled yourself out of Crystal. Can you tell us a little bit about your role as a managing director for blockchain and digital assets and the kind of investigations you were doing there?
Yeah, so as you said, yeah, I went there as managing director of blockchain and digital assets.
Yep.
Mostly focusing around the investigation side of things, and I dealt with things that you'd expect from a big American corporate. A couple of examples: I did some onboarding for a private bank in the Caribbean for a high net worth individual. That's something I quite enjoy doing. To see where that money's come from.
So it's almost going backwards on the blockchain to see where the funds came from rather than going forward following a hack.
Exactly. Yeah. Go back to the beginning, see what it's interacted with, if it's touched ransomware, scams, terrorism, etc., then provide a report that shows it's okay to onboard that person or not. And this is the risk. It was just, things like that. But there was an insolvency one as well that I did. Can't say the name. Because that's still ongoing, but they said one company had misappropriated their crypto, and it was all their fault. And when you look, it just went round in a big circle and back to the first company. Clear, it was controlled by them, and at the moment, I believe, as a result of the work that I did on that case, they're now going after property and things like that they managed to locate as a result. So fairly decent-ish result. But again, that was I think there was over 1,000 people scammed in that case.
Wow, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And then you started Prometheus Insights. That's your baby. You are the CEO, founder, etc. I noticed from I think I went on LinkedIn this time, and it says on LinkedIn you provide expert reporting for crypto investigations and blockchain analytics, asset recovery and insolvency, to cybercrime intelligence and wealth verification. Just what you were talking about there. What does all of this mean, and how does it link together?
Yeah, so obviously do a range of services across crypto and cyber with various partners I've got. And the same with the asset recovery. It's not something I would do personally. Obviously, I could have done when I was in the police, but obviously not now. So now, I have to have partnerships with law firms and people that have the right tools to deal with that. And again, with the other services like I'll do source of wealth, proof of wealth. So a lot of individuals, especially high net worth, they're getting asked questions by their banks. Where is this 100 million worth of funds come from? So, there'll be a quick audit. So I can just go, one, yes, they own it. And two, this is where it came from and it's not touched anything bad.
Yeah.
And then also started doing training as well. We're going to be launching something soon on that as well, with Rob Waugh of Horosgate. So there's that side. And then there's the usual blockchain analytics side, where we've just anything and everything to do with tracing crypto and providing intel reports or expert witness reports.
So people like me can instruct you to get our blockchain analytics reports to prepare for court and for writing to exchanges.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're using Crystal, as we discussed as well. And obviously you still got all the contacts there that you had.
Yeah, I use Crystal. I use blockchain explorers as well. And I do have access to other tools as well. Okay. Should I need to verify.
And just out of curiosity then, in your view, are there any inherent weaknesses in blockchain analytics? Because, and I ask a question, then I sort of semi-answer it, which isn't very helpful. But to my mind, it's as good as the data set. Commingling can be an issue. And sometimes the software doesn't quite work in the way that people intend. In as much as sometimes, and I know that you don't do this, but some people say, right, I click the button and the money's gone there. Cool, done. Rather than reviewing it and recognizing that there might be commingling issues or things that are not quite like off-ramping in different directions. Are there any other issues with it that may need to be drawn to other people's attention? And if so, how do you overcome them? Because you do this as your bread and butter.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is sort of like knowing what you're doing, like you just said, with the tools. And I've seen it a lot of times. Like all of the tools will do a similar thing. You'll put the address in, and it will give you a distribution of where the funds have come from and where they've gone. And a lot of people that maybe haven't done correct training or any training, or they just sort of been sold the tool and then been left to it, no real support. They will click the button. It will say, yeah, it's all gone to, I don't know, should we say Binance?
Yeah. Usually.
Pick it out of thin air.
Yeah.
And then, so they then go, yeah, that's it. But it's not necessarily the case, because there's a lot of factors to take into account. That address that they've used, it could be that it's receiving funds from other things. This is just one example. And therefore, where it's sent, it could just be like a hot wallet for an exchange. So it's going to be sending it all over. So it's not going to be accurate. So that's when I'd use a method like, lots of methods, but one would be temporal analysis, where, I would look at the incomings and outgoings and then follow it rather than just push the button. That's just one way. But I've gone off tangent a bit there. So it's nice to sort. Yeah. So obvious one, privacy coins and mixers. Obviously they can be a problem. I think some tools now are saying that they can trace through some mixing services, but I don't know if I've ever been that trusting of stuff like that.
Yeah.
A lot of examples that, like in the past, it was only because it was things like someone had used the address twice, so they was then able to go backwards and then figure it out, or it was something like they'd paid a load of money in and then took it straight out. So it was really easy to spot and stuff like that. I think Monero is getting more popular.
I thought that had died a bit of a death.
No, I mean, only from what I've seen coming in.
Yeah.
It seems to be one that they they're starting to look at using a bit more, mainly on sort of like darknet marketplaces and things like that.
Yeah, I really thought Monero died a death. I don't know why people stopped using it, started using Tether.
Yeah. I mean, Tether, super popular. And I imagine now with the changes in regulations across Europe, I imagine USDC will start showing up more regularly as well.
Yeah, because Tether's been delisted in lots of European countries because it doesn't follow MiCA.
Yeah. So I can see USDC coming through, but USDT on the Tron blockchain seems to be quite popular.
Yeah. I'm just very surprised that you're coming on Monero because I honestly, I'm not seeing another link.
Just like I can only say what what I see. Others might be completely different, and that's fine.
I'm seeing a lot of random coins being used. So obviously people steal, decent, say decent coins. That doesn't sound right, does it? But people steal, XRP or Bitcoin or Solana or whatever it may be. And then they trade it into stuff I've never even seen. Portfolio was Panther coin. Yeah. I saw the other week there was several halal coins, all sorts of stuff where it's just marketed in a particular way, but they're essentially worthless.
Yeah.
I find it very bizarre that people swap their coins into that and then it just has no worth.
I think some of it would be, I mean, if we're talking illicit actors, it would be a case of the cross-chain complexity. What tool supports Panther chain?
Well, precisely.
Yeah, no one. And there's your issue, and that's one of the things, the cross-chain.
But then you've got to convert it back into something sensible to cash out.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's just part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, depending on the exchange, yeah. But then it would go to Panther coin, and then I don't necessarily know where it's gone after that, because the chain's been supported. And yes, there might be a Panther chain explorer, but without looking, I couldn't say how good it was. I've had a few. I've looked at it, and it's like there's nothing you could do. It's pretty much a worthless explorer. Some of them. There's that side. There's the false positives as well. What
does that mean? False positives.
So it's basically saying it will say something is illicit when it isn't, and it happens, in information security and cyber, and it's a normal thing, and it's been happens for years. So it might be that they've just labelled a wallet as being involved in a ransomware, but it's because they've maybe looked at it wrong or been given false information.
Right.
So they'll label it, and then as I said before, someone's wallet could then get frozen by law enforcement, and for no reason at all, just because it was labelled incorrectly.
And when you talk about wealth verification work, what's your value add there? I mean, we touched on it, but why would people come to you for that sort of thing? apart from the obvious.
Yeah. Yes. So it's So the wealth verification thing. So what we do there, and the reasons for why it's getting popular, as I said, banks are now auditing, and onboarding KYC and things like that. They want to know stuff about these companies, about these individuals before they'll take them on as a client. So what I do is provide proof that they actually own those assets as the first thing. Because it'd be easy for someone to just give someone a wallet and say, yeah, I've got 100 million in there. Can you just chuck that there? And they'd be like, so it will prove they've got it. And we do that with, there's a few methods of doing it. The obvious simple one is get a letter from their exchange, obvious one.
Yeah.
But you can also do things like you can sign their wallet, you can sign it using their private key. So only they can do it. And that's one I've done in the past. And I'll just sign the message saying, I, Scott, own this address. And that's it. And then they can then share that with their public key. So no one then knows the private key. So it's all safe.
That's quite interesting.
Then we can look and you can verify. I could take a snapshot or a screenshot of that on chain as well to show that is there. They could only have done that if they had the private key. And that's the proof side done. And then for the source of the wealth, that's when we start going backwards. So we'll have the wallet address most of the time, and we'll just go backwards and we'll check all the addresses. So I'll be able to see where it originated from as its genesis. So, it started there, and then from there, it's only done this, and this. It's gone 5 hops, say, and it's only interacted with exchanges, and it's now sitting in this address, and it's not done anything since 2024, say. And then again, I can provide visuals, I can provide transaction data, and that's all verified on chain as well.
It's like the provenance. It's like good provenance testing.
Yeah, it's all immutable. They can't change it. Yeah. So if if they have interacted with something bad, I'll see that. If the amounts aren't right, I'll see that as well. And I have had that, like 70 million short of what they said there was. It's just it provides that. I can then provide a report for that, and then give a risk score if required, depending on client's risk appetite, things like that. And again, it can be bespoke. Could just add anything that if they want to know about something in particular, which I've had before. Like they want an explanation of Solana, something like that. I could do that as well. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one final question, which I haven't written down, but it's just occurred to me as we've been talking. It would be useful to get your thoughts on this. And it's about public and private, if that's the right terminology, collaboration, police and law enforcement, police, and people like me. Because some victims go to the police and the police sort of wash their hands of it, don't really do anything. So then it comes to people like me and we're able to build evidence, but of course it costs a lot of money. Do you feel like there should be, given that your experiences in policing, a better relationship between private people, myself at private law firms or private investigators like yourself, and the police? I'll give you an example. We've got a couple of clients, completely unrelated, who have reported things to the police. The police haven't really done too much with it, or said, yeah, we'll do something, and then haven't really. And they've come to me and we've worked through it. We've just got an injunction to freeze funds in one case. And in another, we wrote to the exchanges who ended up with the funds to freeze them, and nothing really happened. And the client didn't really have any money to pursue it because it's expensive to go to court. I got a call recently from the client and an investigator on those 2 separate claims. And they say that there has been a big arrest in Paris relating to individuals across Europe on the same day. And what it means is there's clearly been some investigation and some arrests made by the police. And if they knew what I knew about these individuals, it may have expedited the process. And if I knew what the police knew, we may have been able to get orders quicker or more, or just more easily. So it's sort of crying out for this partnership between police and the private sector. Do you feel like we need that? Can we do that? Can police forces do that? What with?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be sort of issues with that and sharing, and and the sort of the machine that law enforcement is, and how slow it is to do anything of any significance. I can imagine there'd be a lot of hurdles, but I was made aware of City of London Police have gone into a partnership with a law firm, and I think they're based in America, I'm not sure, where they did a pilot already, where I think they helped an elderly gentleman get back 800,000, I think it was. And they're now going to do that regularly so action fraud or whatever, they'll look and refer cases to this law firm. But for me, and I have posted about this on LinkedIn, I don't know, that raises issues for me. I mean, why is there only one law firm? Why isn't there a register of law firms that they've been, who have they been in consultation with? Have they spoke to any other law firms? I mean, it seems really unfair to every other law firm, and there's some great ones out there, that then, this other firm are essentially cherry picking or getting referred all the best jobs from action fraud.
It's like a commercial decision made there.
Yeah, it just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, it's only my personal opinion piece. So where's the fairness in that? And then our city being compensated by that law firm to do it, and then there's issues of integrity. Maybe, I don't know. But I say it's just personal opinion.
But it would be great, I think, if there was an information sharing system at least. I mean, is that something that the police can they do that as a matter of principle?
I mean, if you think about it, for years as an investigator, I collaborated with the Crown Prosecution Service. They're lawyers, they're barristers, and there's never been an issue with sharing all my confidential investigations with them. So what's the real difference? Is there some sort of agreement you could all sign, legally binding, that protects all the privacy issues and the disclosure issues and everything else that may cause a problem? It's just like it's the same with the international sharing and collaboration. It's tough, you'll say something, they'll say go to Interpol will say, oh, because of Brexit, UK aren't covered anymore, and that's something I had happen. And things like that. It takes a long time. If I wanted to send a letter to a force overseas, I'd have to do like a memorandum of understanding, and all sorts of stuff, like international letter of request. And it could take like a year before they get it, by which point everyone's
already gone longer.
Yeah, and there's nothing left. And it's just things like that could do with being sped up.
Yeah, because one of the clients I was referring to, the police said, it's an open investigation, we can't share anything with you.
Yeah.
But then on another matter, the police wanted more information from us, and we basically prepared a whole swathe of documents, affidavits, statements, expert reports, and we gave it to the police, and they were delighted to have it, sent to them with a bow on.
Yeah, I think that's the way forward, though, because it's like...
it's expensive, isn't it? 'Cause you've got to pay for private lawyers to put together loads of documents. It's expensive for then the police to pick it up. But they won't pick it up because they may haven't got the resources or time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they may not have the resources to look at that, to do the tracing to the level that it needs to be done, and then provide the evidence in a way that would be admissible in a case. So I think, and they're obviously missing out as well. So everyone's missing out. So it's something that should be considered.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, Scott, thanks for coming down.
No problem.